Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see you all. Our lecturer today, Mr. Issac Yomtovian, we were discussing earlier. 3 days ago, he had 3 days ago or last week? Was last week.
It was Sunday last
yes,
week.
he told me that he had 150 people for his lecture in Persian in Holon, was it right? Well, first of all, the Iranians in Holon are in thousands, you know, so it's not comparable to Haifa. Haifa is people are mostly like you, came, studied here, and went, you know, went back. So we only have a few couples, very few Jewish Iranian community here. Even most of them are Baha'is, actually, the presence of Iranians. So don't expect so many people in Iran related. But I'm happy to see here also non-Iranians that are interested in the subject. And before we start, I would start with some biographical notes of our lecturer today. Mr. Yomtovian was born in Tehran. As he says, a stone throw from Shah's palace, the Marble Palace, in 1948. Attended the Muslim elementary school, worked in his father's fabric store located in southern Tehran, where he was exposed to many of the stories in his book, in his fascinating book, I would say. Completed Jewish and Muslim high schools, and after only 1 week in Tehran University, left Iran and joined Kibbutz Gan Shmuel in near Hadera. Volunteered in the Six-Day War, and while studying civil engineering in the Technion, worked in the survey department of the Israeli Department of Defense. In 1971, he left to Lincoln, Nebraska, received his Master of Science in Water Resources, then continued his graduate and postgraduate studies in Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, in the fields of environmental studies, agriculture engineering, and operation research. In 1978, he opened his first engineering company named Enviroscience. Salam, befahme. In 1983, received the Executive Master of MBA, make it short. In 2012, published his first book, Living Iran. This means you have plans for another book. He has presented his book in over 14 states and 3 countries, including England and Italy. He is married and has 4 daughters and 1 son with 5 grandchildren. As we say, currently he lives in the LA. And practically the lecture of Mr. Yomtovian is more or less about his book. Here you see the Persian version of it, Persian translation. The original was in English. And of course, whoever will be interested, I'm sure you will be able to provide the information where to get hold of it. So as we say, the floor is yours.
Okay.
Most welcome.
Allow me to stand up. So
Stand
this
up,
way,
sit down, whatever you
this is I feel a lot more comfortable to stand up. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Soli Shahwar,
No problem.
for inviting me to come here. It's really a pleasure to come back to Haifa and be at the presence of the scholars. Actually, all of you are far more scholar of Iran than I am, so you have to forgive me if I make a mistake in my presentation. I'd like to also thank my sister Homa for coming from Netanya here tonight, and my wife Odette for encouraging me to come to Israel on this trip, and also encouraging me to speak when I come. And then Dina, who is our hostess here in Haifa. We are staying at her home. Thank you for hosting us. Everywhere where I go to speak, usually there are standard questions that they ask me. And if for some reason you don't understand me in English, ask me in Hebrew or Farsi. I will be glad to translate the words into those languages. But just the first thing everybody asks me is, what is this book is all about? And I try to explain that I have tried to take the reader with me into Iran, back to Tehran. And the reader starts as a child. And therefore, the way I write the beginning of the book is kind of like a child story, that I take you to our streets of Tehran, and as you already know, Sheikh Hadi, that's the area, Khiyaban Sheikh Hadi, that's the street Sheikh Hadi, that's across the street from the Marmar Palace or the Shaish Palace. And in that neighborhood, they were Jews, Muslims, and as I explained, next door, Baha'is across the from our home. They were very Orthodox Jews. They were very liberal Jews. There were extremely Orthodox, conservative Muslims that you couldn't see their faces when they would come out of the home, the woman. And there was one prostitute in the same place that we lived. And then the Russian family, Christians. So it was a mixture of the society. And then I take you through the streets. I show you where is the grocery stores, the small ones, the big ones, and then I carry you through the local schools, the elementary school, the high school, and try to explain to you how the life was in that particular neighborhood. After you become familiar, then you grow with the child. You start playing with your friends, and the friends are Muslims kids, Jewish kids, Armenian kids, Assyrian kids, and you experience the day-to-day life in that neighborhood. And the entire book basically is collection of short stories. So it's not a lecture, it's not an academic book, it's not a history book, and it is not meant to be a book that is taught in universities. It's just basically stories. But each story is a fact. It's the truth of what has happened, with one exception. The exception is that sometimes I didn't have permission to use the real names of the people. So in that case, I changed the name, but events are accurate. So you start with a very dramatic story in the beginning of the book. As the book starts, I tell you a story that it just shakes you apart. And you say, how could that be? Then, after you read that story, you go to the next one, and it becomes kind of gradually you get used to what's going on. And then I take you to the southern part of Tehran. Now, why do I do this? Majority of the books that are written about Iran or Tehran or Shiraz or Isfahan or various stories, they are written about those who were educated, they were living on a northern part of Tehran, they were the people that far more intelligent, or I would classify them as elites. The southern Tehran was where the commoners lived, those who really didn't go to school, or if they went to school, the maximum education level was like 6 levels, grades. And they were very, very conservative Muslim population in the south, and they were very poor. Now, why this book is different from the other books that I have read? Because it's about those people. It's what I classify as 85% of the population of Iran is that category in the villages and so on. Where did I get these stories? Because my father had his store, fabric store, in the southern part of Iran, in the heart of that type of community, and I worked for him in his store while I was going to school. And then later on, when he was ill and he couldn't operate the store, I did it. Therefore, I was there around the clock. And I lived with these Muslims in their homes. Sometimes I slept in their homes. Sometimes in the summertime, I went to their villages and stayed with the kids and the moms and the pops. So that's how these stories developed. So what's the importance of this? So what? You know, we all know these stories. What differentiates this book from the others? You know, why should we read it? I say that, in my opinion, when I started writing the book, I wanted to tell the story of life in Iran to my children. And I wanted them to tell the same stories to their children, the next generation. Because these type of storytellings, which I call it oral history, it's not written in the standard textbooks. It's hard to find them. I used a lot of references, like Dr. Habibullah Levi, that is the father of the history of the Persian Jews. 5 books he wrote, 5 editions, very thick. Then Children of Esther, that was written, collected and written by Human Sarshar. Then you have Yazdi, Dr. Yazdi, who was the right hand of Khomeini, that he wrote his memoir about Khomeini and the whole revolution. I used the book by Abbas Milani, who is in Carnegie, he's in Stanford University, and he has written a number of books. The most famous one is The Shah, and many other books that I kept reading them and trying to document what I write based on what somebody else has written. One of them is Barbal Kharad. Barbal Kharad is a book in Farsi, On the Top of the Wings of Wisdom, that is written by Chacham Yedidia, that was the Jewish leader when we didn't have rabbis at the time. Chacham was Jewish leader, and he passed away. His son David Yedidia is the rabbi in Los Angeles, which runs the largest Persian synagogue, I think, in the world. Nesach. Yeah. So this book is in Farsi, and it's very well documented about the Jews of Kashan, Jews of Isfahan, how they got into the bazaar, how they started their jobs, what they were doing in the ghettos. I had similar stories, but it's far more reliable when you document it by somebody like Chacham Yedidia. I say, okay, in his book he said this. The Jews of Iran, as all of you know, they have had very long history in Iran, 2,500 years minimum, from the Cyrus the Great. And if we believe the fact that at the time of Cyrus the Great, the number of Jews that they lived in Iran were, let's say, 180,000, some they say 150,000. The population of the Jews that Cyrus the Great freed from Babylonia and brought them to Iran, some they think that it was 180,000, some believe 150,000. You probably scholars, you know far more accurately than I do, but even if assuming that they were 10,000.
Actually, that's the figure that is usually used.
The 10,000. Even we
10,000 moved from Babylonia to Iran.
Right. Many the others they use far larger numbers, but let's say even 10,000. If you assume that each Jew would have an average of 2.5 to, it used to be 4, but let's say 2.5 children, you would think that after 2,500 years there will be far more than 80 million, far more than 83 million. Right now the entire population of Iran is 83 million, and the Jews of Iran right now is about 10, 20, 25, 30,000. So what happened during this period? I try to go back and forth through my stories, think of what else happened in Iran besides the story of my family, the story of others, and then jump from years to years. So I start with the Cyrus the Great, the period of Hachamanesh, and then I speak a little bit about Esther and Mordechai, and then I jump into Sasanian period. And while I'm telling stories, it just doesn't happen. And then during Sasanian, I will go through back and forth, and then speak about the Islamic capture of Iran, and then what was the role of Jews, and I mix the history with some of the stories that I have to tell, because I speak about like a Jewish theater. My uncle was, besides everything else, he was also an actor and playwright. My sister was also a playwright for the children in Iran. So they used to have plays in the real theaters in Lalezar, and I document where they had these theaters and what type of shows, Bar Kokhba, this and that, but they were trying to bring back to the period that we lived the history of the Jews of different periods. So that's how I go back to when the Islam comes to Iran and what happens to the Jews. And then I tell you the stories that I heard from my grandfather and here and there, what happened in Jubare. Jubare was a ghetto of Jews in Isfahan. And I say that, in my opinion, from my point of view, what caused that Jews were put in a ghetto and how they lived. And then I go back and forth between various books and I say, where is the source of anti-Semitism in Iran? And not only anti-Semitism, but anti-non-Muslim. And I speak about some of the laws that became part of the constitution of Iran. And then I keep going and come to the present. And then I will, from Islam, period of the Islam coming to Iran, I go to the Safaviya period. From Safaviya, I jump into Nader Shah a little bit, and then Qajariya, and then Shah's father, and the Shah, and then I sum up what I believe was the cause of Shah's failure and Khomeini coming to power. So this is kind of the perspective that gives you about the book, that as a child you go in, then you get introduced into politics and so on, and then you're introduced into the culture, theater, music, Persian language, what was the role of Jews in medicine, what was the role of Jews in saving what I believe the Farsi language. So that kind of gives you a perspective. Now, the second question everybody asks me is, why did you write this book? And not only that, how did you write it? And what's the format of the book? So how I wrote the book was after 71, after I graduated from Technion, I got scholarship in Lincoln, Nebraska in the field of water resources, so I go to Lincoln. I don't know how many of you have heard of Lincoln, Nebraska, but if you take the map of United States and you cross like this, where these two lines cross, that's Lincoln. And near Lincoln is Omaha. That's where the underground bunkers exist, that when 9/11 happened, Bush went to Omaha, that bunker. Why is it? Because this is the furthest point from either corners of United States. That's the safest place to be. But it's far from New York, it's far from California, far from Chicago, far from everything. It's a place in nowhere. When I went there in 1971, there was not a single Persian in that state. There was maybe a total of 200 to 400 Jews. I'm talking about American Jews. No Jewish Persian Jew at all. Besides that, not only I was Persian and Jewish, I was also lived in Israel. So kind of I tagged around the title of Israeli kind of. So any subject that would come about Iran, Judaism, Zionism, Israel, I would get a phone call. Come, tell us what happened. So in order to be able to talk about the subject, I had to learn it myself. I was not a scholar. So that's how it started. So I started reading, researching, finding out the subjects that would happen. 1973, Yom Kippur War. I'm sitting there in the synagogue. All of a sudden, 4 or 5 people say, Isaac, there is a phone ringing. So I go there, yeah, oh, war, what's happening? So I had to learn about 73 Yom Kippur War. And then when I talk about it, obviously everybody would ask me about 67 war, where I was actually in Golan Heights. And then what happened, capture politics of Israel and so on. So that's how it started. And later on, years after, that was 1971, and it took till almost 2001, 2002, 2003. That's when actually I was giving a lot of lectures about Iran, about Israel, of Judaism. So one professor by the name of Mark Levine from University of Cleveland State University invited me to give one session on a seminar about Iran. And he had it set up like a program on TV we had, which you have the professor that interviews the speaker, asks questions, and all of the students are sitting in the classroom. It's dark, and he's taping you. And when the tape is over, 45 minutes, then they put the light and the student asks questions. The 45-minute story of the conference, seminar, ended up to be the entire semester. And every week that I had to be prepared for 45 minutes of talk about subjects and questions and answers that would last minimum 45 minutes extra. So I would get the questions ahead of time. The professor would send me, for example, I give you the example. How was oil discovered in Iran? Who did it? What was the impact of discovery of oil on the economy and relationship between Iran and United States? Simple. Then the other question would be, is it true that Jews were called najes? What is najes? How do they relate to the subject of najes? So that's another one. The other one would be, what's the difference between celebrating Passover in Iran versus in United States? The other question would be, tell us more about the Persian food, all types. So every time I would go, I would have a series of questions that I would talk about. By the time that the semester would be over, I had a book, outline of a book. And that's how it started. So, giving you a flavor of what's in the book. I tell you the story of myself and Jalal. Who is Jalal? He's a Muslim kid. He's 6 years old. I'm 6 years old. His father is an extremely poor green vegetable seller. He sells vegetables in a store in our neighborhood. extremely poor, has like 10, 11, 12 kids. He is from a village called Sedeh. Sedeh is a kind of a village near Isfahan that is well known to be the most anti-Semitic village in Iran or town. There are some people that believe that the entire population used to be Jews. They converted to Islam, and therefore they had to be holier than Pope, or a pot that is warmer than the soup that is warmer than the pot. You know, there are a lot of ways of saying it. So that's why they are so anti-Semitic. Anyhow, he is the son of this Sayyid. Sayyid. Who is Sayyid? Sayyid is very similar to Kohen. Goes from father to the son, father to the son. And they are descendants of Muhammad. And the way you know that they are Sayyid is by green shawl that they put around themselves. So when they walk in the street, you know that they are Sayyid. And if it's a woman, it's Sadat. Sayyid, Sadat. So this Jalal is the son of the Sayyid, and everybody has to respect the son of the Sayyid. So he's my playmate. We are playing, it's a summertime and so on, and my mother made, you know, they used to take some type of sweet stuff, put in the freezer, and it would become ice cream. We call it ice cream. It was not ice cream, it was sweet water with color. And so I'm eating this out where we are playing. It's very nice. And this kid, 6-year-old, dying from looking at me that I'm having this ice cream and I'm enjoying it. He wants a little bit of it. So as a child, I offer it to him. So he takes, he bites it, he enjoys it, okay? So both of us, innocent kids, we basically act as human beings relating to each other. One wants ice cream, gives the other. Can you imagine what happened after he told his father he had a piece of ice cream that was in the mouth of a Jew? The rest of the story is in the book, what happened. Then I tell you another story. And I different times I like different types, different stories of the book. But my favorite one is Mr. Zamani, Aghay Zamani. Mr. Zamani was my literature teacher in high school. Short guy, very kind of healthy guy, and extremely good teacher. And he was a Muslim, Shiite Muslim teacher in a Jewish school, Kurosh, 7th grade. He came one day and he said, guys, 40 students in the class, we are going to study about Holocaust. What's Holocaust? We didn't know anything about Holocaust. We didn't know what he was talking about. He said, you are going to study. So to each one of us, he gave a different task. One had to remember or study the names of the ghettos. One had to study the names of the countries, on and on and on. 40 subjects. My subject was to read the number of the Jews that were killed in each ghetto. That was my subject. So I had to go to university. And the day that he defined that we had to give this talk, he invited the entire school, all of the teachers, Jews. He was Muslim. He invited all of the Jewish teachers. And we had to go to find books about Holocaust. There were not that many books in Farsi about Holocaust. So we had to research, go to the university. And so I'm making the detailed story very short. At the bottom line is that 40 kids learned about Holocaust, at least us, also our Hebrew teachers and also Jewish teachers, because of Zamani. That's another story. There is a lot more to it than just this. Then I give you another story. I keep going until my time runs, and then we open for questions and answers. Abbas Agha is a very beautiful story. My father's store was in the southern part of Tehran, as I said. Mullahs, they lived there, and drug traffickers were there. For those of you that are familiar with Tehran, was Darvaz Qazvin. Darvaz Qazvin was southern part of Tehran, where there was a city called Shahr-e-No. That was the city of prostitutes. The prostitution at that time was totally legal, and as long as they were practicing within the boundaries of that city, drug traffickers, hoodlums, you name it, that neighborhood had it. Jews, they didn't exist there. They were in the northern part. So Abbas Agha, who is Abbas Agha? He was the head of the slaughterhouse in the southern part of Iran, Naziabad, for those of you that know. Details of it is in the book again. And he was called Abbas Agha, Sir Abbas, Mr. Abbas, either way. Was very good friend of my father, who would call Abram Agha. My father was Abraham, Abram Agha, Mar Abraham, Mr. Abraham, Sir Abraham, either way. So these two, they were very close friends. And Abbas Agha, who was Jahil, you know, he had no education, he was huge, 6 foot tall, big, huge hair, and you know, the hat that they had, and they never put their jackets on their its sleeves, and they were always hanging on their shoulder. They never put their foot in the shoes. They always walked like, you know what type of man I'm talking about. And then he had a lot of noche. What's noche? It's like in mafia, you have head of the mafia, and then you have soldiers that work for you, under you. He had the same way, noche. A lot of other people that worked in the slaughterhouse. They were all my father's clients, and Abbas Agha was the head. He had a lot of wealth. He had villages, owned villages. In Iran, you were allowed to own villages with the people that worked in it, and animals and farms. So he is a very wealthy guy, and he wants now to become a really respected man. He wants to become a man that everybody respects, not only his noje, but everybody. So what can he do in order to become such an important guy? He has to become Hajj Abbas. What does that mean? He has to have the pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina, so that he will have the title of Haji, to become Hajj Abbas. So in those days, in order to follow the rules of going to Hajj, the religious leaders believed, Muslim religious believed, that when you go to Hajj, you should own nothing. You should go with kafan, just a fabric, white fabric, and very simple shoe. Nothing, you own nothing, no gold, no watch, nothing. You just go without any assets. And then you do what you have to do, and you come back, you become Haji. So Abbas Agha wants to do the same. So how does he do it? He comes to his best friend, Abram Agha. He comes to his best friend, and he gives him everything he owns. I was there present in that shop of my father when he came with a suitcase, blue suitcase with the silver stuff in it, and he opens up. My father said, make a list of all of the gold, all of the jewelry, all of this, and all of the papers, ownership of farms, land, everything. He does that, put it aside. I want to tell the story very fast, so anyhow, this is done. Before he wants to leave, he said, oh, by the way, Abram Agha, one more thing, you are responsible for my children, my kids, my wife, my mother-in-law. Make sure that they have food, this and that, because I don't trust anybody, only you. Okay, fine, they go, he goes, this, that. Anyhow, my job was from that day from day on until he comes back, I had to go with my bicycle every morning to knock at the door and ask what they want, and they give me a list of cheese, eggs, this, that, buy, come back. The story is far more detailed than what I'm telling you. I tell you about how they served me bread when I said I am representing Abbas Agha. I'm the first one in the line. I would say Abbas Agha, the cheese is first. Everything is Abbas Agha. I am represent. A Jew represents him, and it's done. No questions asked. So one day I go to do the same job, and the mother of the wife, who was a little lady, skinny little lady with chador and so on, opens the door, no chador, nothing. Says, run to your father, tell my daughter is dying, come and take him to the hospital. It was shock. So I get on the bike, I go to the store, I tell my father had a store full of clients, throws everything away, jumps on the bicycle, runs into their home. Remember, it's southern Tehran, everybody is Muslim, the stores are next to the houses, all of the neighbors are outside, they're watching what you are doing. Abram Juhud for everybody else. So Abram Juhud comes, drops his bicycle, runs into the Abbas Agha's house. And minutes later, he comes back, on his shoulder a mattress. A woman is on the mattress with blanket all around her, and yells and says, open the door of a taxi. When he comes to put her into the taxi, blood rushes out in the sidewalk. What do his neighbors think he's doing? The Jewish guy went to the bedroom and picked up the wife of Abbas Agha, throws in the taxi, brings the wife to Malihe Yashar. Who is Malihe Yashar? A Jewish woman who was midwife. Her husband was one of the well-known doctors. The sons, they are all doctors now. They had a little clinic in the Jewish Sheikh Hadi neighborhood.
What year is it? The year.
The year, it's in the book exactly. It must be before 60, let's say 61 or so. During 60, 61. Okay. But I have the exact in the book. So my father takes her to the Malihe Yashar. Whatever you do, take care of her. Malihe Yashar, which I met in Los Angeles, she just died 3-4 years ago. My mother cooks soup and everything every day to take to her, taking care of her. Everything is great. A week later, the mother, the little tiny lady, Khanum Bozorg, they used to call the grandmother, usually they call the great mother, comes. Her daughter is perfectly okay, takes her home, but thank God, Baruch Hashem, it's done. So Abbas Agha comes back, comes to my father. So I was in the store. That's the story. I see him coming in, Abbas Agha. His 2 hands are inside his jacket. His foot is totally in his shoes. Everything is okay. Now he has this tasbih, is that right? And coming in now, quiet. Comes in, sit there. Now my father says, Abbas Agha, khosh amadi. Abbas Agha, welcome. He said, what are you talking about? You call me Abbas Agha?
Haj Abbas.
Call me Haj Abbas. From now on, you call me Haj Abbas, Abram the Jew. Abram Agha changed, became Abram the Jew. Abbas Agha changed, became Haj Abbas. Anyhow, I don't want to give you the rest of the story, but I want you to know that this story is so interesting when you read the rest of it, and you will finish the book and come back and read this 1, 2, 3 times, because it has a lot of aspects to it. Tell you the story above Rubab. How many minutes do I have?
Can talk another 10 minutes.
10
Maybe
minutes.
this story.
Okay, then we will have questions and answers. Ali Agha. You know, my sister maybe remembers when I tell her these stories. Ali Agha was a cab driver, and my father every so often wanted to take the entire family to northern Tehran for vacation, summer vacation. So he would ask Ali Agha, his wife Hajar, to come with us and bring his cab, take the entire family to northern Tehran. So he was best friend, Ali Agha. He would sit with him and joke, and his wife was wonderful, laughing, always joke and this. So we go north. We sit near the river, like you know how the Persians are, where you have a river, running water, and you have some trees and green. That's a blessing.
Paradise.
So we put you put the blanket down, and you put your watermelon, if you remember, in the cold water, the running water, so it gets cold. And then you take it out, you cut it with knife, and you give each person a piece. So that river at that time was pretty muddy because there was a rain before that and so on. It was pretty muddy and lots of sediments and so on, and it was not really clean water. But for the watermelon to be there to get cool, it was okay. So you take it out, you cut it. So we are sitting there, I notice Ali Agha takes his watermelon, dips it in this dirty water, and then he eats it. Think about it. The rest of the story you read in the book. Then I tell you another one. The same Sayyid, Jalal, his son, the same Sayyid, okay? Across the store, his store, little tiny shop, was a masjid. Masjid Shishegaran, they used to call it. And you know, in order to be sure that everybody respects him, 5 times a day, he walks, making sure everybody sees him with his aftabe. Aftabe is a container that you put water in it and you wash. Wuzu. Wuzu is when you wash yourself
Before praying.
before praying. You purify yourself, you know, your legs and so he makes sure everybody sees he's going with his aftabe, this and that, so everybody knows that he's going to pray. Now aftabe is also a container that you take with yourself to the bathroom. So when you do your stuff, you clean yourself, you don't clean yourself with napkin or paper, you do it with water. So you put down this aftabe on all type of junk. In the center of masjid usually is a pool, little pool, sometimes big pool. So everybody comes and they dip this aftabe into this pool, and they take the water that they want to do the wuzu. So in this case, when you go to this mosque, they don't change the water in the pool every day or every hour. They change it when it kind of gets really, really dirty and smells like hell, and you have this sediments built up in the bottom, and it's just then they will maybe clean it. Otherwise they just pour new water. So he takes this and goes to the masjid and then washes in the wuzu and the namaz and so on and so forth. The same guy that uses this water to wash himself and so, the same guy, when he sells a sabzi or green vegetable to me, like those are yaqirun dash, whatever it was, I cannot give him the money. I have to put the money on a piece of paper so he will take it. Think about it. And you will read the rest of the story in the book. So these are the type of stories. Then wrapping it up, the same guy in southern Tehran, with this type of lifestyle all of a sudden comes to Israel. And where? Kibbutz Gan Shmuel, Shomer HaTzair, absolute liberal left kibbutz. Go and put him in a room, and there is a woman, volunteer woman from Scandinavian country. They are roommates. Can you imagine what type of shock it is? I mean, good or bad, I am not judging, but
Yeah, you are not complaining as well.
so here, and this is a different universe. And then you have to live in kibbutz. Kibbutz is not the same as Tehran, southern Tehran. It's new life, so you get adjusted to it. So I tell you about a little bit about the story, then I tell you what happened in the Six-Day War, where I was in Golan Heights, and then later on in Medidot, in the Misrad HaBitachon, as the doctor said, and what we did in Kunetra and so on. It's a little bit of story that relates somehow to Iran. It's not unrelated. Then I go to United States. Can you believe I go to Nebraska? I'm the only guy that, at the time I had black hair, believe me. Full black hair, and that was 1971, when the guys, they had the sideburns up to here, bushy hair, like Elvis, right? And I get there October 10th, 1971, November, like now, in a couple of days, and November, the last Thursday of the November is what's called Thanksgiving. And I get a call from Grace Hansen, Mrs. Grace Hansen. Are you Isaac? Yes. Yomtovian? Yes. You are invited to my home for Thanksgiving. Who are you? Mrs. Grace Hansen. How do you know me? Why do you invite me to your home? I tell you the story of Thanksgiving. The cultural shock of difference between Darvaz Ghazvin and Lincoln, Nebraska. How I lived with I actually ended up. She had a PhD in chemistry and home economics. She was 90-some years old. And I lived in her house with her. I never forget it. 28 Apple Street in Lincoln, Nebraska. Tell you about that. And it's not unrelated to Iran, because I keep relating it. I keep going back and forth. The final story, and then we start. The final story is this. We had a client by the name of Habib Agha. Habib Agha was owner of a huge village, very conservative, Orthodox, Muslim, Shiite guys, had a lot of sheep and this and that. Very good friend of my father. Absolutely loved my father. As he heard that my father is leaving Iran, he was very upset. Came to our home. I don't know if my sister remembers or not. Comes to our home. So my mother wants to be good hostess, brings this food and this plate and that plate. And so the guy doesn't touch it. My father says to my mother, listen, get a plate, paper plate or plastic plate with orange or an apple that is not peeled or cucumber that is not peeled, with a napkin, put it in front of you. So as my mother does that, Habib Agha takes his knife from his pocket, peels the orange, puts it aside and eats it. And there is a lot more to it. Same thing happens when I am in Great Neck, New York. I'm invited to the home of my cousin, who is a doctor. And there is a fundraising, and a very respectable Orthodox rabbi is invited to my cousin's home. My cousin is not religious. He is as liberal as it gets. He eats whatever it's there. So the rabbi comes, this is fundraising. He's coming to get money. So my cousin's wife brings all type of food, this and that, puts in front of him. The rabbi sits there. I told my cousin, I said, listen, take a plate, a paper plate. Put a orange with peels, apple with peels, and cucumber with peels. Let it be. Oh, okay. Gets a paper, puts it. The rabbi takes the knife, starts eating. Questions and answers.
Yes, please. Who wants to be first?
Go ahead. If you don't ask a question,
I
then
just wanted to
yes.
to know
Yes.
more about the book.
Uh-huh.
Originally, it was written in Farsi or
English.
No, it was written in English. The first version was called Living Iran, Tarke Iran. It was written in English, and it was scattered stories based on Dr. Mark Levine. Then, because sometimes I neglect to tell you that every penny, every proceed of this book I donate to a foundation that my friends and I we formed called Kurosh Alumni Foundation. If you want to know more about it, I tell you. But anyhow,
The Kurosh School.
yeah, the Kurosh school that I went and my friend, all of those who were in the same 40, remember 40 students
Okay.
that we learned about Holocaust? We are now in Los Angeles,
Okay.
30 some of us. And we formed a foundation called Kurosh Alumni Foundation.
The school still exists?
Yeah.
The school, I have the picture of it, yes, it exists. But unfortunately, it's not used by Jews, it's used by Muslims.
You
But,
should name it the name of this teacher.
Zamani.
But it's
We,
not-
we honored him, but I mean, we gave money for him. So let me just finish. So because I was donating, so the demand for it went up. So my daughter Leah kind of summarized it, edited it, and put it in the Kindle. When it went Kindle, it went viral.
Okay.
So then there were a lot of questions, and so on, including, I just will very brief.
That's all.
People, they want to know about the food because they read about it, smells like this, you put in, you make it this. So they wanted recipes. So I have a chapter about recipes. I had a section that had nothing the entire book had nothing to do with women. It was all about men because all of my friends were men. So a lot of them asked, what about women? So I went to my sister. I said, hey, tell me something about women. So she told me about the group of Persian Jewish women that they had uniforms on, Pishahangi, if you remember that, okay? But they were active in Zionist movement. So I told about the women and so on. So that book became my Iran.
Okay.
So that's what this book is all about.
Now in which language?
So this one is in Farsi language, and I'll tell you how it became translated into Farsi, the fascinating story. But let me answer the other questions and I get back to this. Go ahead. Go ahead.
How many of the 40 are already in USA?
30 some. Out of 40, 30 some are in Los Angeles. A number of them are in Manchester. A number of them are in New York. A number of them in New Jersey. But we have a reunion, a good number, not 40, because a couple of them got killed. Hushang Sumech, one of my classmates, was killed here in Israel. He was here. A couple of other ones are in Israel. So they didn't come.
Anyone in Iran? Or?
In Iran, no, none of us. And the interesting thing is, right, that's right. Out of the 40, this is very interesting statistics. Out of the 40, 39 of us became engineers or architects. One became a doctor. And remember, in Iran, anybody who would fail, the teacher says, you don't belong to the engineering class, go to the medical class. From Riyazi, go to the Tabi'i, if you remember. Yes.
Why, if I would have been in the dilemma of where to send my son or daughter to learn and study in the United States. The last place I would choose was Nebraska. Also, there was a big film and a nice film.
Right, Lincoln, yes.
Why did you go there?
Because the first answer, immediate answer, I got assistantship, scholarship.
Oh.
The second one was my brother, who was in California Political School, Polytechnical School. He was transferred in Lincoln, Nebraska, so I went to see him. But it was the greatest place for me to be, because I was in demand.
You were a star.
And I was studying, and I was paid to study. Can you believe this? Paid to. But then I went to Cornell. Cornell is second to MIT or so. Cornell.
It's a question of identity. So in each country, which identity did you think was your first, and which identity did others think was your first? From Iran
Excellent
to
question.
Israel to America?
Absolutely. That's the purpose of the book. Absolutely excellent question. Because, and this is such an incredible question, because in Iran, and you will see it in the book. The book, besides the stories, is also conversation, back and forth, between me and my friends, Jews, and my friends, Muslims. I have a number of Muslim friends, real friends, that we are still in touch. We still email and so on. This particular friend is in the Islamic Republic. He is in the government. The stories are here. Akbar Sheikh al-Islami, that I got his permission to use his real name. I mean, it's incredible. Okay? In these discussions, when you read the book, I am claiming I'm more Iranian than you are. I'm real Persian. You guys came from Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, here and there. I can show you. I take you to the cemetery, to Isfahan, and I have pictures of it. Sarah Batashir. Okay? And I will show you a stone grave that says the date on it. The date goes 2,500 years. I prove to you, I've been here. My father, my grandfather, this. How long does it take somebody to live in a house to become owner? 2,000, I'm the owner. You are just a tenant. You came only 600, 700, 800 years ago. And you know what? You probably, if you were here, you were Jew. Because of the reasons So that is the argument I have in this book with my friend, Muslim friends. And I go back and forth. Music. I talk about music. Yeah, music. Jews did a lot for the Persian music. Because the Muslims, Shiite Muslims, were prohibited to play, to make, to teach. Jews were allowed. We did it. You didn't do it. Farsi language, medicine, education. The Jews of France came to Iran. We made the modern education. On and on and on I go to say that I am the real Persian, okay? Now, my land is Israel, my homeland, Jerusalem. This, I daven, here it is, I face Jerusalem, and Abraham, Yitzchak, on and on, okay? Then I come here, forgive me, all of those who get offended, but in 1966, when I came to Israel, before I was called Issac Yomtovian, I was Parsi, Persian. What is going on here? I went to Technion, okay? I was a good student. All of the Ashkenazi guys and so on, they knew about Milga, they knew about Halva, they knew about this. I didn't know anything about it. And there was no advisor. Mar Schneider, God bless his soul. Mar Schneider was the guy that was in charge of us. I didn't know anything about what am I supposed to do, what courses to take, what classes to. I had no advisors. And all of the other guys, so here I finished Technion, and I'm still not 100%. I am Jew, okay, but I'm not 100% belonging. I love to do it. I went to 60. I was volunteer. I went to Shara Golan. I went to Golan Heights. I was there. And after that, I stayed there. I said, I said, okay, you are in civil engineering. The best use of you is medidot. You do survey. I lost a friend because he went on a mine. I wrote in the book. So here it is. I want to, but then opportunity came for United States. I said, all right, let's try. And I tell you, a person like Mrs. Grace Hansen, totally stranger, takes me in, treats me that I never been treated so well, wants me to become American, wants me. So I become American, I become a Central Committee of Republican Party. I become in a Central Committee and the other committee, I forgot now. So I become best citizen of this town and that town. Rotary, I get awards. I was president of Rotary, president of Kiwanis Club. I became president of Chamber of Commerce. I'm doing really well in my business. I mean, this is what I call ultimate land. I'm just as good as anybody. But had I said all of that, let me go back. I left Iran, but Iran never left me. I love Persian music. I love Persian poetry. Every chapter in this book starts with the poetry. And the poetry that I choose relates to the chapter. When you read it, you know what's coming up. And then I love Israel. So I have Rabbi so-and-so said this. Talmud says this says that. And so as a human being, it is very, we just came back from Europe. We went to the ghettos. I relate to people I don't know. They are Jews. That's all it takes to feel like you're part of them. You go there and your heart tears apart when you look at it. So what am I? Excellent question.
I want to
Excellent
ask a
answer.
question
Yeah.
divided to two. We see a lot during the last years, the image of the one is that who speaks the big Satan, the big enemy, and flags out and into fire and demolishing and atom bombs. I want to ask you,
Yes.
today, would you send those books where your friends from the past are mentioned? Do you send them the book to see, because you told us about Parliament guy, and now we are used to what happened in Europe and also here in the Middle East, where cemeteries were demolished, Jewish cemeteries were demolished. So what is actually going on there? Do they really hate? When I come, let's say, covered and
Right.
disguised, you say, they knew I'm not here and I'm from there. What happens there for the sake of God?
Okay.
We are flooded with information, and nobody gives you the real picture.
Yeah, I am, as I said, I'm not scholar, but I tell stories. To answer you, I give you a story and then I answer you. The story is real. My friend who went to Technion with me, studied Khashmal, electric, and finished. His name is Yosef Imani. My sister knows him. Yosef Imani becomes very successful in Israel in the field of electric engineering. Then in 1970, I think 74, 75, he goes to Iran. Very successful, builds a home, gets married, children, and so on. Comes 79 is the revolution, and he wants to run away. Because he was educated in Israel and his all of his background, they don't give him a visa to get out. They don't let him to go out. So he tries to run away. So the long story is they capture him and his wife and kids and put him in the jail. Okay? Nothing new about that. But what's new is this. Every morning, the guards would come to his door, kick at the door, tell him, Yosef, get up, here is your talit, here is your sidur, here is your tefillin, daven. Every day they made, every Pesach, Passover, they had to matzah and everything. The guy became such an Orthodox Jew after a year. Why did I tell you this? No, it's not. I'm not just saying it because to be funny. Because I believe the following. I believe the Islamic Republic of Iran, the people that are running the country are the people I talk about. Those are the people I knew. I grew among them. Ahmadinejad, I was collecting monthly payment for my father from his neighbors in Narmak. Those people prefer to have Orthodox Jews rather than Reform, conservative, non-practicing Jews. If you are a Jew, you are supposed to practice Judaism as they see it. They see Judaism only as orthodoxy, not anything else. So, in order to make sure that this guy remains as a good Jew, not a bad Jew, they force him to become Orthodox. Yosef Imani is now in Canada, and he can tell you that when he finally ran away to Italy, he was teaching Kabbalah, and there the guy became real Orthodox. Yeah. Became shochet. So, in my opinion, and that's what I argue also in my book, Islam that I know, and I went to the Muslim school, I used to pray all of the namaz and so on, so I studied fiqh. Islam that I know does not hate Judaism, but hates Jews who don't practice Judaism as they see it. Now, having said that, there is a book by the name of Darde Ahle Zameh, that Darde Ahle Zameh, the pain or the suffering of the people of the book. Suffering of the people. This was published in Farsi in Sweden, and the guy that edited it, his name is Reza Goharzad, who is a very close friend of mine, and he is working with me on the book to put it on a tape. So anyhow, this book tells you the entire documentation of where the anti-Semitic started. The book written by Muslim guy. I have gone to translation of Quran, Surah Tu'beh, verse 26, 27, 28, which is in my book, and I code it, and I then translate it, and say, here is the source. And then I will go back to Antonio, the father, he was from Portugal, who was a Christian, who comes to Iran during Safavieh, converts into Islam, and then becomes the head of the Islamic studies and Islamic laws and so on in Iran, and helps to write what we know, Jame Abbasi, which are the 13 laws against Jews. So, making it short for you, I believe that hatred that exists in Iran against Jews is not at the level of what was in Holocaust, in Hitler's Nazis and fascists. I don't believe that there is a systematic method of taking Jews out of their homes, put them in the jail, or killing them. I don't believe that that is the case in Iran. What I do believe is the Islamic Republic of Iran tolerates, the word is tolerates Jews as long as they behave as
They should.
They should. As they see it, they should.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
how it is. That they are not superior. they are inferior. As long as they accept the fact that they are inferior and behave the way they want, so they are okay. And I give you a lot of examples of it. I talk about the jaziyah, the tax that the Jews they had to pay. On and on. But I tell you as a story, so you have to conclude what it means. Okay.
I just wanted to ask. You wanted to ask something?
Please.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Shoot.
I have another question regarding the identity.
Right.
Let's say you're in France and someone asks you who you are. What would you say?
A Persian Jew
Okay.
who is American.
A Persian Jew who is American.
Right.
Multiple
Nothing about
identities.
Israel.
Well, in my opinion, by saying I'm Jewish, I'm indirectly saying that I love Israel. That's my interpretation. I have the nationality of any place I go. Issac Yomtovian. Everybody knows
But you're Jewish.
that I'm a Jewish. Now I tell you a really short story. Forgive me. Really short story. I used to be the district engineer in central Minnesota. It's about 1,500 square miles. 1,500 square miles. That's a huge area, okay? In this region, they're all agriculture. Farmers. These farmers, they never seen a Jew. But they had a lot of engineering problems. In this case was flooding and hydraulics. So they found out there is a guy by the name of Isaac in St. Cloud, Minnesota. St. Cloud, Minnesota is a little tiny town in the central Minnesota, which we didn't have even 10 Jews. Okay? That guy could help us. So they invite me, I go there, and the first thing I say, my name is Issac Yomtovian, I'm Jewish. I went to this school and that school and so on. Yes, I know what your problem is and I can solve it. But in order to solve it, blah, blah, blah. So it took me 2-3 years. It had a huge problem in the central Minnesota. Had to do a lot of with marshland, flooding, and a lot of farmers, they were losing their land, their animals were getting sick and so on. So I did a series of what's called the drainage system, and it worked, and they became very wealthy, okay, and did very well. One day I'm sitting there, Sunday afternoon, TV is on, 1986, 85, I think, when there was terrible financial problems in United States, especially on farmers. I mean, they were devastated. They were going bankrupt, one after the other, and they are interviewing a guy on the TV about the financial problems, and they are going bankrupt, and the bank is taking over. I'm watching him. I know the guy. So he said, "This is all because of the Jews." These Jews, these bankers, this, on and on he goes. Oh, I went just ballistic. I said, okay, I'm going there. So every Wednesday night, we would meet only Wednesday nights after church. Some Catholic people, they go to church on Wednesdays. I don't know if you know this or not. So Wednesday night, they would go and they milk their cows and so on, and then at 8 or 9 o'clock they come all. We used to meet in a bar, and they all had their beers and so on. And by 10 o'clock we had our meetings, which was engineering meeting. So I go there, and I'm telling you, I am just absolutely angry, upset. Said, "Hey guys, I saw you on the TV, PVC. You said Jews." "Oh no, I didn't mean you. You are a good Jew. You are exception. You are there." I said, "What the hell?" So,
How many Jews he knows?
what I'm trying to say, your question about nationality and this and that, it's a very tough one when it comes to Jews, I believe. and especially with my wife, we were in a gathering, a dinner, and we had some couples sitting with us, and I asked them this question. I said, how many Buddhists are in the world? A couple of billions, okay? How many zeros are in front of billion? Okay. How many Christians are there? So many billions. How many Muslims are there? So many billions. Okay, now comes the Jews. How many Jews are there? Well, it's not billions, but probably hundreds of millions. Less? Well, okay, maybe this. So it's very hard for people that read about Israel, read about Jewish, read about Nobel Peace winners, read about technology in Israel, read about high tech, read about everything. You cannot find a newspaper, I believe. You've opened Wall Street Journal any day. There couldn't be a piece about something that the Jewish community or Israel or somebody has done. So if you hear that, how do you relate to this, that only Jews of in a whole universe, there are 14 million, 14 and a half. How could you imagine this? 14 million people impacting the universe so much that billions of people cannot. Billions. We are winners of 45% of the Nobel Peace winners are Jews. Or all types of for chemistry, for medicine, for everything. So because of that, it's very hard to separate Judaism from Israel. That's why when they ask me, I say, I'm Persian Jew that is American.
But Persian comes first or Jewish?
I use it this language. I'm sorry. I could have said Jewish, Persian, American. There are a lot of ways of saying it, but I like it this way. What can I say? I have a lot of problems with my Muslim friends because I always tell them I'm more Persian than you are. I'm the owner, you are the tenant. I say that Iran belongs to me. I should be running it, not you.
As a last question, I think, could you explain, please? You said at the beginning of your talk that you have your own explanation of the revolution or something like that. You said.
Oh yeah.
So I would be interested to know what's your.
Okay, I tell you because I forgot about Maryam Manzouri. I think that's I should say
okay,
it, but
okay.
but I will answer you this. I left Iran '66, way before revolution, and but I stayed in touch with Iran all the time with my friends, and all of those 30 some that are in Los Angeles, they used to be in Iran, and they came after 78, 79. So we had our going back and forth, and why don't you get out of Iran? This is going to happen. It's a very long story, and I have it there, but I want to start with the great Satan. The question that came, and I will relate it. The movies, TV, newspaper, walking in the streets of Tehran, you will always say in the Majlis, in the Senate Majlis of Iran, huge Marg bar Amerika, the great Satan, death to America. So the great Satan is America, the little Satan is Israel. That's written all over. And they always, when they want to start some type of political talk, they always refer to America, the great Satan, Israel, the little Satan. Why? Again, I'm talking from perspective of those who I grew up with, who are now running the country. So don't forget that. I'm telling from them, not from myself. During the period of Mossadegh, which was 1953-54, during that period, Mossadegh was very well educated from, I think, in Swiss. He was educated very well, and he was related to Qajariya family, and he was like really revolutionary guy that comes back to Iran, and they ask him to run this office and that office and so on. And he said, hey, listen, guys, the British having a pipe that is taking all of our oil without measuring it. They just take it. They pump it, they put in their boats, and they go. There is no measurement, nothing. Plus, they only give us kind of like a charity. Every so often give us so much money, and that's it. And they have control of this Khuzestan and all of the area south where the oil is. That doesn't work. Oil belongs to the country. So he nationalizes the oil. And United Nations believes in him as a man of the year. Times magazine calls him man of the year, and this and that. So now British Petroleum, British, I want you to remember the word British. British Petroleum all of a sudden loses billions of dollars, all of the oil that was getting for, yeah, this guy's crazy, we got to get rid of this guy. British, they tried to get rid of Mossadegh. They planned his assassination, doesn't succeed. They planned whatever, doesn't. They go to Truman, President of the United States. Truman said, no way. We have nothing to do with it. We don't want to enter into the politics of Iran or this and that. Nothing. Comes Eisenhower. Eisenhower, Dallas is his minister, foreign minister, and then the brother of Dallas is the attorney that represents British Petroleum. And Abbas Milani explains it far better than I do in his book. So British come to United States, please, you get rid of this Mossadegh. And they stupidly, very badly, they become the front to get rid of Mossadegh, which they do, and they bring Shah. So therefore, United States is the one being blamed. If you ask any Persian, Muslim, Islamic Republic guy, they say the revolution or the toppling of Mossadegh was by the CIA of America, which is true, but the roots of it is in British. They did it. So now, instead of British being the big Satan, America is big Satan. So that's basically the story of why they say America. So America comes, and now Seven Sisters, they call it, or oil companies, they come, and they also take advantage. You know, they are not there to be socializing with Iran, and on and on. So comes 1973, Yom Kippur War, embargo of Arabs happen. Shah says, forget about it, embargo. I don't. If remember, I sell to Israel, or I sell to whoever wants to buy, but at the price. What was his price? If you remember this, I don't know. He takes a bag, paper bag, oil, salt, milk, egg, bread, I don't know what else. It's called basket of food. Basket of food. Says whatever is the price of this basket is going to be the price of the barrel of oil. From $2, $1, whatever it was, all of a sudden jumps to $10.75. 73. Then he goes to Saudi Arabia, he goes to Iraq, and they form OPEC. And from there on, it starts all of the oil issues and so on and so forth. Now comes Nixon and Henry Kissinger. There is a document written that by Kissinger himself, that Abbas Milani goes through it and analyzes from 10 different angles. But my understanding of it is Nixon and Kissinger decide that the power should be in Iran and Israel should be second. So we have to support Iran as much as possible and sell AWACS jet fighters with the radar, and we don't sell it to Israel. And they come and they finance Iran. So now what happens, what I call the extreme, exaggerated amount of money coming to Iran. All of a sudden you have a funnel. You know what's funnel? That's something that you want to put in a bottle, fill it up. Okay, mashpich. Okay, funnel, mashpech. Okay. If you have a lot more than this can handle, what happens? Falls all apart. There was so much money coming to Iran because you remember, $2 was the oil. Now it's $11, and then it's coming from all over the world. Everybody is buying from Iran, and now the price of basket of fruit went to $12, $13, $14. Doesn't matter. It keeps going up. So money starts coming to Iran that they didn't know what to do with it. So what happens? Everybody becomes like corrupt. Everybody wants more of this. So Shah's sister, which I met, which is in my book, Ashraf, which I talked to her and so on, corrupt like brothers, uncles, aunts, everybody. So now you have corruption going on. Then in order to control the people, you have to have Savak. Savak comes and they have no Rahmanut. On and on and on. So here in Iran there is unrest. My opinion is that the intellectual people in Iran who studied outside, many of them my own friends in Germany, in the United States, everybody comes with the idea of democracy. We have to bring democracy to Iran. Shah is a dictator, this and that. They come to Iran, they want to change the system. Okay? Now, it's when you have a really hard, dry wood, you cannot bend it. You have to wet it, you have to slowly bend it. This was not the case. This is hard wood. They're trying to bend it, it breaks. So a lot of these guys, they come and they start doing revolution. Now what happens? Khomeini, with help of Yazdi, the book that Yazdi wrote is incredible book.
His memoirs, yeah.
And he is the one that organizes the Islamic students movement in United States, England, France, Germany, all over. Remember this. How is religion of Shiaism practiced in Iran? I tell you this, then you can, the rest of it you will understand. The way that was practiced was each akhund, each mullah, each clergyman had a territory. Okay? For example, let's say Akhuza, Neve Sha'anan, this and that belonged to one guy. How they practice their religion? Akhund used to go to home of so and so on Monday morning from 8 to 10. What do? Roze khuni. They go to their home, the family gathers, and you preach to them from 8 to 10. You get paid $10, $20. Then you go to the next house. Then 180,000 mullahs. That's not a simple number. A lot of people, they say it's a lot more than 180,000, but the one that Abbas Milani uses, 180,000 mullahs. They have a chain of network that is all over Iran. They control those families. How do you feel if your rabbi controls your family? Like Orthodox ones, you know, the guy doesn't do anything. Let me go ask my rabbi. I want to marry someone. Oh, let me ask. I want to buy a house. I have to ask. The same thing. This network of the mullahs had such a huge control on the people. Now comes a guy by the name of Khomeini, who doesn't like the Shah, he doesn't like what's going on, utilizes this network through Yazdi and people like Yazdi. And this creates all of this movement that the Shah is unable to control. And then I give you a lot more to it. It's not only that, the Jimmy Carter, what he had done to Iran and what was his impact on Iran. I give you about the British. There are books written by so many people.
I just wanted to know
Right.
your opinion.
So having that just Maryam Manzouri, and that I'm done. Let me just tell you this story, I'm done. Just one short one. Yes, go ahead.
I would like to ask, you say that the Jewish in Iran are originally 2,500 years. Are also the Jewish in Iraq from the same time? Because I've heard that there was some time that there were no Jewish in Iraq. I have no idea what is true. Are they originally from the 2,500?
I refer that to the doctor who is far more scholar than I am. Would
You
like
want to
to
finish the Manzouri first?
Yeah, I'll finish the Manzouri. So my book was written in English, published all over, and a woman by name of Maryam Manzouri, who is a journalist working for Voice of America, her husband working for BBC. These two stations, if majority of you, hopefully all of you know that they're not great friends of Israel, and therefore they're not great friends of Jews either. Maryam Manzouri reads the book that I wrote, and she doesn't believe in it, and she, just basically criticizes it and said, I don't believe what's in it.
Doubts it.
Doubts it? How could that be? So I call her, and I invite her from Washington with her husband to come to Cleveland, and I invite her for Shabbat. Friday night, we have the Kiddush, we have the Netilat, we have the entire Mizmor, on and on. The next day, I take her with her husband to the synagogue. At the same time, I arrange with the rabbi to speak about the book, on and on. Before she leaves, going back to Washington, say, listen, Isaac, I understand where you are coming from, but I'm going to do my own research. And if you're wrong, I will correct you. And I said, I will be happy to be corrected. Please, if I'm wrong. She goes, she finds the book, Darde Ahle Zameh. She sends me that book, and she says, how shameful it is that people like me, educated, journalists, that we didn't believe in what you wrote. How shameful it is that people like me that are educated, reading books, journalists, they don't know the facts. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to translate your book into Farsi so that only 1, 2, 3, 4 people that read the book in Farsi, they will understand and they believe what you have done. 3.5 years it took her to translate in Farsi voluntarily. And I wanted to bring her to Israel actually. When it was published, we invited her to Los Angeles. We had a book signing and she came and she spoke about the book. But God willing, one of these days we bring her to Israel and she will tell you from her own language what impact it had on her, the book and the stories. And she is a Muslim from Tabriz. Anybody knows Tabriz? There are no more Jews in Tabriz. Every Jew in Tabriz was slaughtered. All right? So I'm so thankful to her that she translated the book, and I hope someday we will translate it in Hebrew.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Excuse me, you. Well, the Jewish community in Iraq, as in Iran, it's not something original. They were mostly taken from the Assyrian and then later Babylonian, what do you call it? Jewry, but the diaspora. They were taken from the land of Israel to that places. So none of them is actually original that they started there. Yes. So there were Jews taken from the land of Israel to there, and then, for example, the Iranian Jewry, some of them with Ezra and Nehemiah came back to Israel, to the land of Israel, but about 10,000, that's what I said, 10,000 moved to the Persian Empire and settled in the territory, and this is the beginning of the Jewish community. So
אוקיי, אז זה כן מהגלות הראשונה שנשארו שם.
yeah, well, some from the early one or their ancestors actually, because there was we are talking between 700 BC and 70 BC, yes. So and the others joined in the second diaspora, yes.
כולם מעל 2,000 שנה שם, זה מה שאני
Yes,
אומרת.
yes, definitely.
It's actually interesting because that brings the difference between Hebrew and Jew. 'Cause
Yes,
the
yes.
first Hebrew who lived in Iraq, which was Babylon, was
Ivrim,
Abraham.
Ivrim, yes.
אוקיי.
Now, if you had
That's
to do the
another-
calculation, we're now in 5778, and it was believed that that's from the counting of Adam, that Abraham was born in 1948. The first Hebrew in Iraq, Babylon, and Haran was 3,830 years. The word Jew only first appears correctly in Malachim
Yeah.
with Ezra and Nehemiah. So the difference between Ivri, Hebrew, and Yehuda, Jew. In terms if you're looking at the word Jew, then it is, as Sonny has mentioned, in Ezra and Nehemiah, it's the first time in Menachem Bet is mentioned the word Yehudi. But the first Ivri, Hebrew, was Abraham.
Abraham,
3,830
yes, of course.
years.
Yes.
Dr. Soli, you should recommend him to the UN to be the
I-
voice of Haley.
I don't
And
need to
whenever
recommend
Mahmoud-
him. He has a lot of
No.
prestige himself. I don't know.
I'm
Well,
so
anyway.
happy to hear it because I never had this explanation in the Jewish media, you see.
Okay, well, Jewish media is Jewish media. You have to
Yes,
come
she
to
belongs
Ezri Center to. Anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Issac Yomtovian.